She stood there in her wedding dress, mascara running down her face like black rivers of pain, and whispered words that would haunt everyone in that room forever. You think you know betrayal until it comes from the two people you trusted most in this world. Your best friends. The ones who helped you pick that dress. The ones who promised to stand by your side. But what happens when they've already been lying in his bed? What happens when the man you're about to marry has been sleeping with both of them behind your back for years? And what happens when you find out just days before you say, "I do"? Most women would cancel the wedding. Most would walk away quietly. But Tasha didn't do that. No, what she did was far more shocking. She let the wedding happen. She walked down that aisle knowing everything. And then, in front of 300 guests, she exposed them all. But the real twist? The truth was even darker than anyone imagined. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why some betrayals don't just break your heart. They shatter your entire sense of reality. This is the story of 3 women who thought they knew each other better than anyone else in the world. Tasha, 29 years old, brilliant marketing executive. The kind of woman who planned everything down to the last detail. Michael, her fiancé, 32, charming real estate developer, the man every woman wanted and every man wanted to be. And then there were her best friends. Chanel, the wild one, always pushing boundaries, always living on the edge. And Renee, the quiet one, soft-spoken, thoughtful, the friend who always listened. They'd been inseparable since college. 7 years of friendship, countless secrets shared. Or so Tasha thought. Because while she was planning her dream wedding, while she was picking out flowers and tasting cakes, her fiancé and her best friends were sharing something else entirely. And the question that haunted Tasha once she discovered the truth wasn't just how could they do this to her. It was how long had this been going on? Who started it? And most terrifying of all, how many lies had she believed? But before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's go back to where it all started. 3 years before the wedding, that would destroy everything. Tasha met Michael at Chanel's birthday party in downtown Chicago. He walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, and Chanel introduced them with a knowing smile, saying, "Tasha, meet Michael. Michael, meet the only woman here who won't fall for your usual lines." They laughed. They talked for hours that night about everything from their favorite childhood movies to their biggest fears. By the end of the evening, Michael had asked for her number, and Tasha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe this time, love would be different. Their relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Michael would surprise her with weekend getaways to Michigan. Handwritten notes left on her bathroom mirror. Late-night conversations where he'd tell her she was the most incredible woman he'd ever met. And Tasha believed him because why wouldn't she? He introduced her to his family. She introduced him to hers. Chanel and Renee were thrilled for her, always asking about wedding plans even before Michael proposed. They'd spend girls' nights at Tasha's apartment, drinking wine, scrolling through Pinterest boards of wedding dresses and venues, laughing until their stomachs hurt. Renee would always get quiet when they talked about Michael, and Tasha noticed, but never thought much of it. She figured Renee was just being Renee, reserved and thoughtful, maybe a little envious that Tasha had found someone first. Chanel, on the other hand, was the opposite. She'd make jokes about stealing Michael away, playful teasing that made everyone laugh. "Girl, if you mess this up, I'm swooping in," she'd say, winking dramatically. Tasha would roll her eyes and throw a pillow at her. It was all just fun, just friendship, just the kind of harmless banter that comes with years of trust. But underneath those laughs, underneath those wine-soaked nights and wedding planning sessions, something else was happening. Something Tasha couldn't see. Michael had started texting Chanel more frequently, asking her advice about surprising Tasha. Or so he said. They'd meet for coffee to plan birthday gifts. Innocent enough. At least, That's what Chanel told herself at first. But those coffee meetings turned into lunch meetings. And lunch meetings turned into dinners when Tasha was working late. And dinners turned into something neither of them could take back. It started 8 months into Tasha and Michael's relationship. A drunken night after a company party, Chanel and Michael ended up in the same Uber, and instead of dropping her off first, he suggested they grab one more drink. 1 drink turned into 3. 3 drinks turned into them kissing in the back seat. And that kiss turned into her apartment. Her bed. Her betraying the one person who trusted her most. The next morning, Chanel woke up filled with guilt and shame, swearing to herself it would never happen again. But it did happen again. And again. And soon, it wasn't just physical. Michael would call her late at night when Tasha was asleep, telling Chanel things he claimed he couldn't tell Tasha. That he felt trapped sometimes. That he wasn't sure he was ready for marriage but didn't know how to tell Tasha without breaking her heart. And Chanel, instead of telling her best friend the truth, he became his confidant. His secret. His escape. Meanwhile, Renee had her own secret. One that went back even further than anyone knew. But before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, here's what Tasha didn't know. What no one knew except Renee and Michael. They had history. Before Tasha ever met Michael, before that birthday party, before any of this started, Renee and Michael had a brief, intense affair that lasted 3 months. It happened 2 years before Tasha came into the picture. Renee met Michael at a real estate conference where she was working as an event coordinator. They connected instantly, spent nearly every night together for weeks, and Renee thought she'd found something real. But Michael ghosted her, stopped replying to texts, blocked her number, disappeared without explanation. Renee was devastated, but she never told anyone, not even Tasha or Chanel, because the shame of being discarded like that was too much to bear. So when Chanel introduced Michael to Tasha at that birthday party, Renee's heart stopped. She watched the man who had broken her fall in love with her best friend, and she said nothing. She smiled. She congratulated them. She pretended she'd never met him before. And Michael played along because admitting the truth would ruin everything. For 2 years, Renee stayed silent, watching Tasha fall deeper in love with a man she knew was capable of cruelty. But 6 months before the wedding, Michael reached out to Renee privately. He claimed he wanted to apologize for how he treated her years ago, that he was a different person now, that he felt terrible about what happened. They met for coffee, and that coffee turned into old feelings resurfacing. Renee told herself she deserved closure. She told herself this was just about healing old wounds. But when Michael kissed her in his car that afternoon, she didn't pull away. She kissed him back, and just like that, the affair reignited. Now Michael was sleeping with both of Tasha's best friends. Chanel didn't know about Renee. Renee didn't know about Chanel. And Tasha didn't know about either of them. But the universe has a way of exposing secrets. And Tasha's unraveling began on a rainy Thursday night, 3 weeks before her wedding. She was at home, finishing up work emails, when Michael's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower. The message preview lit up the screen. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" It was from a number saved under a man's name, David. But something about the tone felt off. Tasha's stomach twisted. She'd never been the type to go through her partner's phone, but instinct took over. She unlocked it. His passcode was her birthday, which somehow made what she found even more painful. Dozens of messages, explicit photos, plans to meet at hotels. And the contact name, David, it wasn't a man, it was Chanel. Tasha's hands trembled as she scrolled through months of conversations. Jokes about sneaking around. Complaints about how Tasha was too controlling sometimes. Messages where Michael told Chanel she was more fun, more spontaneous, more exciting. Tasha felt like she was drowning. But then she saw another thread. This one saved under, "Work, Kevin." Also not a man. It was Renee. The messages were different, more emotional, filled with apologies and "I love yous," and references to their past. Tasha's brain couldn't process it. Both of them? For how long? She sat on the bathroom floor, phone in hand, as Michael stepped out of the shower, completely unaware that his entire world was about to collapse. Tasha didn't confront him that night. She didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. Instead, she carefully placed his phone back on the counter exactly where it had been, walked into the bedroom, and lay down in the dark, staring at the ceiling as Michael climbed into bed beside her and kissed her forehead goodnight. She didn't sleep. For hours, she replayed every moment of the last 3 years in her mind. Every time Chanel had volunteered to help with wedding plans. Every time Renee had been too busy to hang out. Every late-night work meeting Michael claimed to have. Every lie she had believed because she trusted them. By morning, Tasha had made a decision. She wasn't going to cancel the wedding. She wasn't going to quietly walk away and let them off easy. No, she was going to let them think they'd gotten away with it. And then she was going to destroy them in the most public, humiliating way possible. Over the next 3 weeks, Tasha became someone she didn't recognize. She played the role of the excited bride perfectly. She smiled at dress fittings. She laughed at her bachelorette party. She thanked Chanel and Renee for being such incredible friends. And all the while, she was collecting evidence. She forwarded every message from Michael's phone to her own email. She hired a private investigator who confirmed that Michael had been meeting both women at the same hotel on different nights. She even secretly recorded a conversation where Chanel admitted to another friend that she'd been sleeping with Michael but didn't feel that guilty because Tasha doesn't need to know everything. Every piece of evidence made Tasha's heart break a little more. But it also hardened her resolve. She wasn't just angry. She was done being the fool. The night before the wedding, Tasha sat alone in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house, staring at her wedding dress hanging on the closet door. Her mother knocked softly and came in, sitting beside her on the bed. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" her mother asked. Tasha wanted to tell her everything. She wanted to cry and be held and ask for advice. But instead, she smiled and said, "No, Mom. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And in a way, that was true. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze. The kind of day Tasha had dreamed about since she was a little girl. 300 guests filled the elegant garden venue. Chanel and Renee stood at the altar as bridesmaids, looking beautiful in their matching lavender dresses. Michael waited at the end of the aisle in his tuxedo, tears in his eyes as Tasha appeared in her stunning white gown. To everyone watching, it was a fairy tale. But Tasha walked down that aisle with a thumb drive in her bouquet and a plan that would shatter every illusion. The ceremony proceeded normally. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed on fingers. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Michael kissed her as guests erupted in applause. Tasha felt nothing. No joy, no love, just cold, calculated determination. During the reception, after the first dance and the toasts, Tasha stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "I have a special presentation I'd like to share," she announced, smiling warmly. The room quieted. Michael looked confused but smiled encouragingly. Chanel and Renee exchanged glances, wondering what surprise Tasha had planned. Tasha handed a thumb drive to the AV technician. "If you could play this on the screen, please." What happened next would be talked about for years. But before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like, and share so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The lights dimmed, the projector screen lit up, and instead of a sweet montage of photos, the screen displayed a text message thread. Michael's messages to Chanel. Explicit, undeniable. The room went silent. You could hear people's confused whispers turning into gasps of shock Chanel's face went white. Michael stood up, stammering, "Tasha, what is this? This isn't—" But Tasha wasn't done. The next slide showed messages between Michael and Renee, then photos, timestamps, hotel receipts, a complete timeline of both affairs laid out in excruciating detail for every single guest to see. "I want everyone here to know exactly who they've been celebrating today," Tasha said. Her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "The man I just married has been sleeping with both of my bridesmaids. Chanel, who I've known since freshman year of college, and Renee, who apparently has been with him even longer than I have." The room erupted. Some guests started yelling. Others sat frozen in shock. Tasha's father jumped up, moving toward Michael with fury in his eyes. But Tasha's brothers held him back. Chanel tried to run from the room, but her heel caught on her dress and she fell, sprawling on the floor in front of everyone. Renee just stood there, tears streaming down her face, unable to move or speak. Michael finally found his voice. "Tasha, please, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. I love you." Those were mistakes. They didn't mean anything. Tasha turned to him with a look of such pure contempt that several people later said it was the most chilling thing they'd ever seen. "They didn't mean anything," she repeated. "Chanel has been sleeping with you for nearly 3 years. Renee has been your secret since before you even met me. And I meant so little to you that you kept both of them going right up until 3 days ago. I saw the messages. Michael, I know everything." She turned to address the room one final time. "I'm getting this marriage annulled first thing Monday morning. And as for these 2 women I once called my best friends, I hope the guilt eats you alive for the rest of your lives. You didn't just betray me. You stole years from me. You made me doubt my own intuition. You made me feel crazy when I sensed something was wrong. That's unforgivable." With that, Tasha picked up her dress and walked out of her own wedding reception. Her family followed immediately, surrounding her with support. Behind her, chaos erupted. Guests were shouting at Michael, at Chanel, at Renee. People were filming on their phones. The carefully planned event dissolved into a scandal that would be talked about in that community for years to come. Tasha's cousin later told her that Michael tried to chase after her, but her father and brothers blocked him. Chanel and Renee left separately, both in tears. Neither able to face anyone. The wedding venue emptied within 20 minutes. And somewhere in the parking lot, Tasha sat in her car, still in her wedding dress, and finally allowed herself to completely break down. She'd done it. She'd exposed them. But the victory felt hollow, because even though she'd gotten her revenge, she couldn't get back the years she'd lost. She couldn't erase the trust that had been shattered. She couldn't unhear Michael telling Chanel she was more exciting, or Renee that he loved her. The betrayal didn't end just because she'd exposed it. In many ways, it was only beginning. By the next morning, Tasha's wedding disaster had gone viral. Someone at the reception had recorded the entire exposure and posted it online. Within 24 hours, the video had millions of views. News outlets were calling it the wedding revenge of the year. Social media was divided. Some people called Tasha a hero, praising her for publicly humiliating the people who betrayed her. Hashtags like Team Tasha and Justice Served trended worldwide. Women shared their own stories of being cheated on, saying Tasha had given them courage. But others criticized her approach. They called it cruel and vindictive, arguing that she should have handled it privately. Some said she'd embarrassed not just Michael, Chanel, and Renee, but also both families and every guest who'd traveled to be there. The debate raged online for weeks. Tasha didn't respond to any of it. She deleted her social media accounts, took leave from her job, and moved back in with her parents temporarily. She spent her days in therapy, trying to process the compounded trauma of betrayal and public exposure. Her therapist asked her during one session, "Do you regret how you handled it?" Tasha thought for a long time before answering. "I regret that it happened at all. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. But do I regret exposing them? No. They made me feel insane for months, gaslighting me every time I questioned something that felt off. They deserved to feel even a fraction of the humiliation and pain they caused me. But as weeks turned into months, Tasha started to learn details that made everything even worse. Through mutual friends who eventually came forward, Tasha discovered that other people had known about the affairs. Chanel had confided in 2 other friends, swearing them to secrecy. Renee had told her sister, who kept it quiet out of misplaced loyalty. Even some of Michael's friends had suspected but said nothing, following some unspoken code of protecting the guy. Tasha felt betrayed all over again, not just by 3 people, but by an entire social circle that had chosen silence over honesty. She cut ties with nearly everyone from that chapter of her life. Then, 6 months after the wedding, Tasha received a message that changed everything she thought she knew. It was from Renee's younger sister, someone Tasha had always liked but hadn't spoken to since the disaster. The message said, "I know you probably never want to hear from anyone associated with Renee again, but there's something you need to know. Something Renee never told anyone, not even Chanel." They met at a coffee shop far from their old neighborhood. Renee's sister looked nervous, fidgeting with her cup. "Renee and Michael had a relationship 2 years before you met him," she began. "He treated her terribly, then ghosted her completely. She was devastated. And when Chanel introduced you to him at that party, Renee recognized him immediately but pretended she didn't. She's been carrying that secret this whole time." Tasha felt like she'd been punched in the stomach all over again. Why didn't she say anything? Why didn't she warn me? Renee's sister shook her head sadly. Pride, maybe? Shame? I don't know. But I also think part of her wanted revenge on him for how he treated her. And when he reached out to her again months before your wedding, apologizing and pursuing her again, she fell for it. She thought maybe he really had changed, that maybe he actually loved her this time. The revelation reshaped everything Tasha thought she understood about the betrayal. Michael hadn't just cheated with her best friends. He'd manipulated 2 women who already had complicated histories with him, playing on old wounds and insecurities. Chanel had likely been drawn in by his attention and the thrill of secrecy. Renee had been drawn in by unresolved feelings and the hope of being chosen this time. And Tasha had been the one left in the dark, the one whose life had been built on a foundation of lies from the very beginning. She spent weeks processing this new information, and slowly, something shifted inside her. She didn't forgive any of them, but she began to understand that the betrayal was more complicated than pure malice. They were all victims of Michael's manipulation in different ways. That didn't excuse what they did. It didn't make the pain any less real, but it gave Tasha something she desperately needed: context. And with that context came the beginning of actual healing. A year after the wedding that never was, Tasha sat on a beach in California, watching the sunset alone. She'd moved across the country for a fresh start, taking a new job and building a new life, far from the wreckage of her old one. The wedding ring she'd worn for less than an hour sat in a box in her closet at home, something she couldn't quite throw away but couldn't bear to look at either. People often asked her if the public exposure had been worth it, if she'd do it again. The honest answer was complicated. Yes, she'd gotten justice. Yes, Michael, Chanel, and Renee had faced consequences. All 3 had left town eventually, unable to handle the social fallout. Michael's business suffered when the scandal damaged his reputation. Chanel had moved to another state and cut ties with everyone from their old friend group. Renee had apparently gone to therapy and was trying to rebuild her life, though Tasha only knew this secondhand. But Tasha had paid a price too. The viral video meant she couldn't escape the story. Job interviews turned awkward when people recognized her. First dates became complicated when her name was Googled. The trauma of betrayal was compounded by the trauma of being a public spectacle. Some nights, Tasha wondered what would have happened if she'd handled it differently. If she'd called off the wedding privately. If she'd confronted them in person rather than in front of hundreds of people. Would she have healed faster? Would the pain have been less consuming? She didn't know. What she did know was that betrayal changes you. It changes how you trust, how you love, how you see the people closest to you. And no amount of revenge can undo that fundamental shift. Tasha had spent the last year in intensive therapy, working through trust issues, anxiety, and what her therapist called complex betrayal trauma. She was dating again, cautiously, with walls up that she wasn't sure would ever fully come down. She'd made new friends, carefully, always watching for signs of deception she might have missed before. She'd rebuilt her life, piece by piece, into something she could be proud of. But she was also honest with herself about what she'd lost. Not just Michael, Chanel, and Renee. Not just the wedding and the future she'd imagined, but also a certain innocence, a belief that the people you love most will protect you rather than destroy you. That was gone forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tasha pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She'd been writing down her thoughts lately, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She typed, "I've learned that betrayal doesn't just come from strangers or enemies. It comes from the people you let into the most vulnerable parts of your heart, the ones who know exactly how to hurt you because you've shown them all your soft spots. And the hardest part isn't the betrayal itself. It's learning to trust again after. It's learning to love again without constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. I don't regret exposing them. They deserve to face the consequences of their choices. But I also recognize that revenge didn't heal me. It didn't give me back what was taken. Healing came from therapy, time, distance, and the hard work of rebuilding myself from the ground up. If I could go back, would I do it differently? I honestly don't know. But I do know this. I survived something that could have destroyed me. And that's something no one can ever take away. So here's what I want to ask you, everyone watching this right now. If you found out your partner was cheating with your best friend, not just once, but repeatedly, for years, what would you do? Would you confront them privately? Would you walk away quietly? Or would you do what Tasha did and expose them publicly, making sure the whole world knew exactly what they'd done? And here's the harder question. If you were in Tasha's position, having gone through with the public exposure, do you think you'd feel satisfied afterward? Or do you think you'd feel the same emptiness she felt, realizing that revenge doesn't actually heal the wound? Drop your answers in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done in her situation. Because stories like this aren't just about one woman's betrayal. They're about the choices we all face when the people we trust most prove they never deserved that trust in the first place. And if this story made you feel anything, if it made you think about your own relationships or your own definitions of loyalty and justice, then hit that subscribe button. Because we tell stories like this to remind ourselves that we're not alone in our pain, our anger, our desire for things to be fair in a world that often isn't. Thank you for watching until the very end. And remember, the people closest to you have the power to lift you up or tear you down. Choose carefully who you let in, because, as Tasha learned the hardest way possible, not everyone who smiles at you is truly your friend.